We're going to talk about a concept that if you're coding in C Sharp in many languages, you can't avoid. And that concept is this idea of overloaded methods. Um, so let's get into it. I'm going to start by coding up a basic method that you hopefully can follow along with, right? So if I say public double add double n1 double n2 return n1 plus n2. Okay, and if I say label result.text equals add 23 here, comma 12 point that, semicolon. Okay, so at this point, hopefully this is making sense. We've got two parameters. Their input types are double. This returns one value that's a double. I take the method, I send in some data. That method sends back the result of those two numbers added together, converts it into a string using this interpolation fun word, and puts that into a label. Right, so click the button, and we should see the sum of those two numbers. The signature for this is a private method called add with two parameters. So very technically speaking, the method signature does not include the return data type. So just something to keep in mind is that technically a signature does not care about the data type. It's everything else. It's the access modifier, the identifier, and the parameter list. Now notice these are doubles. Another useful method could be adding ints, n1 plus n2, return n1 plus n2. What do we have here? And I should make it private. What do we have here? We have a method with the same identifier, but a different parameter list, aka a different signature. So this is allowed. This is called method overloading. And it allows us to take this add method, and we can pass it doubles, or now, if we were to add maybe integers, and you can see you can add whole numbers. So you can kind of see the benefits. If we're adding decimals or we don't want to add decimals, what happens is essentially the what's called the just-in-time interpreter will determine what version of this method to call based on the data that you pass it. Okay? How is this powerful? Well, this is powerful because, well, you can add different data types, just as an example, because adding numbers is easy. Okay? Here's another way to overload a method. Again, it's important to know the signature. Let's do private int add int n1, int n2, int n3. Return all three of these added together. So notice that one valid way of overloading methods is by
You have two and twos for your parameter.
thank you. One valid way, the first way to overload a method is to give it the same name, but different param data types. Okay, and I demonstrated that. These are two methods with the same name, but different data types in the parameters. Another way, a second way to overload a method is to give it the same name, but a different quantity of params, right? That changes the signature. You basically got to change the signature. By changing the signature, here's 2 input parameters, here's 3. Now we can call 3, 4, and 10.
So is
Yep.
that like how you would want to do an optional parameter?
We're getting there.
Getting
We're
there?
getting there. Optional parameters are on
Oh,
on Monday. That's on the board to talk about, right? So here we've talked about 2 different ways of overloading methods. Let me do this. Again, you just have to change the parameters. So here's another one. Private int add int n1 double n2. This is not happy because I'm not returning. Return n1 plus n2.
returning an int.
Double. Okay.
There you go.
Why did it not want to return an int? Well, the result of an int plus a double is a double, so I had to return a double. Okay. Now I've got this version of the method that takes an integer first and a double second. Notice, let me show you the third way to overload a method. Double n1 int n2. You notice the quantity of parameters is 2, but the order of the parameters makes this a valid way to overload, right? Whether you take an integer first and a double second, or a double first and an integer second, right? So a third way to overload a method is to give it the same name but a different order of params. By order of the data type, order of the data types, the data types of the params. Okay, so these are 3 ways that you can declare a method with the same name, and like I said, a different signature. It's important to note that by changing, if I were to do, I don't know, private decimal, add double n1 int n2, okay, and let's just say I were to take my double and convert it to decimal, convert to decimal n1 plus n2, and let's return that. Okay, changing the return data type because it's not a part of the signature is not a valid way to overload, right? So our input parameters are double comma int, double comma int, and I thought by changing the return data type, maybe that would be a valid way to overload. That is not the case. Okay, so you're going to see that this does not work, and it'll give you kind of its compiler error. Okay, so that is not a valid way. It's also, the last thing to say about this is that I mentioned basically that what's called the just-in-time interpreter, when it's running your code, has to pick which version of this method to call. And so it has to be clear to the interpreter which method to call. There can be situations which are considered ambiguous. Ambiguous meaning the interpreter doesn't know which overload to call. Okay, let's see if I can give an ambiguous situation here. If I were to say private double add and I don't intentionally cause problems too often. I like to avoid problems, but let's see if I can get this to go. I'm going to try and private double add double. Okay, so we got floats coming in, and we got doubles coming in. And if I call add, passing it okay, yeah, my intentionally breaking it isn't working. Because basically what's happening is it's picking the right. These are these are doubles. 23.3 is a double. This is a double. So it's calling this one, as you can see, one reference. So it's able to figure it out. There are situations that are ambiguous. I'm kind of falling short on coding that right now. But just be aware, when you have overloaded methods, it can become ambiguous if that interpreter doesn't know which one to call on. And like I said, these overloaded methods are very common in C#. We're going to work with overloaded methods the more you work with C#. Okay, so that's kind of the last lecture of today, so I'll stop it.